Okay, can everybody hear us okay?
I think just talk into the mic.
How close do I have? Oh, there we go. We're on.
You can take it out.
Should we just take it out?
Yeah.
Can everybody hear me okay? All right, so we are running a little behind, so we're going to get started. First, I'd like to welcome all of you to Colonial Williamsburg and the Common Cause to All convening. My name is Heather Nice, and I am the Executive Director of Strategic Projects and Partnerships here at Colonial Williamsburg. We are here to discuss reaching teachers and students in schools, so if that is not where you intended to be, the other rooms are down the hall that way. Today I'm joined by Posey Wood, Larry Pasca, and Leah Charles Edouard, and I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves because they will do it far better than I. So we're just going to pass the mic.
Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to see you here, be with you. I'm Larry Pasca. I'm the Executive Director of the National Council for the Social Studies. We are a professional membership association that represents K-12 classroom teachers, college and university faculty, school and district administrators, policy coordinators, and we all have one thing in common, a love of social studies education. I am a former classroom teacher, middle school. Colonial Williamsburg resources were great for me back in that as the internet was just coming out and resources were posted online. And I've also worked in the state education department, in a school district, and a regional education agency, all with some through line of social studies. So it's just a pleasure to be with you here today.
Hi, my name is Posey Wood, and I am a managing director at Wondrous Consulting. But more importantly, I used to be a third grade teacher. And I and my colleagues started Wondrous because we noticed that there was a real opportunity and a gap for museums, cultural institutions, and libraries to reach classrooms more effectively. All of these organizations have great intentions and really wish to be in classrooms and yet struggle to reach them if they are not coming on field trips. And we know that since COVID, field trips have really plummeted. So Wondrous works with a range of partners to help them identify strategies and then execute on those strategies to reach more classrooms and teachers across the nation.
Hi, everybody. My name is Leah Charles Edouard, and I'm the Associate Director of School Programs at the New York Historical Society. So what that means is I manage all of our K through 12 education. I started working at the Historical Society in 2012, so I've been there for a pretty long time. I worked at two other museums before that point when I was trying to figure out what to do after school. And so I worked at the Maurice Jamel Mansion in Washington Heights, and I also worked at Francis Tavern Museum. So I've been in the museum world for a while, museum education specifically. And so I manage our in-museum programs, so our field trips, but also our outreach programming where we go into the schools, into New York City public schools, which there are a lot of them. And then I also manage a program called the Tang Academy for American Democracy, which, as it sounds, is a democracy program specifically geared towards sixth graders. And so we'll talk more about that as we go through today, but that's a little bit about me.
Efficient way to do this. So you did not know this when you walked in the door, but this is actually somewhat of a participatory panel. So we have some questions for you. Just to help us target what we're saying and who we're talking to, if you could raise your hand when I ask these questions and just kind of let us know who you are. So first, what are you coming to us from? How many of you are State 250 group? Okay, so a few. How about museums and cultural heritage sites? Okay. Civic organizations? Okay, a couple. And then higher ed or K-12 educators. And then the nefarious other. Oh, we have some others. I love it. I love it. And then the second question we had, which may seem odd, but you'll understand, I think, when you look around the room why we're asking. How many of you are from the East Coast? This is why we asked this question. How many of you are from the middle states? Not Virginia. No, sorry. Middle of the country this way. So a few people, and then West Coast. All right, so you can see why we asked that question. So we're gonna have a couple questions that we just chat through, and then hopefully we'll have time at the end for Q&A. So I wanted to start, if you may have seen last week, the American Historical Association released the results of a 2-year study that showed we have, quote, a healthy national history teaching culture that includes a common ground of norms, resources, and vocabulary that teachers nationwide recognize, including political neutrality, critical thinking, and informed citizenship, end quote. Yet we've also seen data that indicates teachers are overwhelmed and fewer college students are entering teacher recruitment programs. Posey, I'm going to ask you to kick us off with a broad question that I'd like you to narrow in ways that you feel are particularly relevant to the 250th. Based on your research, what do we know about teachers and students in the classroom?
Yeah, so Wondrous actually just wrapped up a large research project for Colonial Williamsburg. So this is specifically with social studies teachers from around the country. So this is fresh on my mind. Where to begin? Let's see. It is a broad. I think I would start with something that is not going to be like a shocking headline to anybody in this room, but in our survey data, as well as our conversations with teachers from around the country, one of the themes is just that teaching is hard, right? It's always been hard, but it is extremely difficult to be a teacher today. And so, about 50% of teachers just say that across their career, whether they're a new teacher or a veteran teacher, that they are experiencing what they would call high levels of job difficulty and stress. So just to kind of set that foundation, I think that's a really important piece for anybody who's trying to reach classrooms, to go in with that empathy that at least 50% of the teaching force is feeling under a lot of stress right now. And we see those numbers increase in certain groups. So one group where we see that number increase are, interestingly, suburban teachers. Their stress levels appear to be higher. K-5 teachers, and public school teachers. So those our groups are far more likely to report high levels of stress. So what's so hard about teaching? As a teacher, I can rattle off a whole list and we can be here all night, but I'm guessing there's also a lot of teachers and former teachers potentially in this group, so you'll have your own answers there. But what the data tell us with consistency is that meeting student needs is a real challenge. And not just meeting student needs, meeting a wide range of student needs that has increased particularly since 2020, since COVID is when a lot of teachers cite a real increase in academic needs as schools and schedules were disrupted for, in some areas, a long time, as well as social emotional needs. And so as a teacher, they are trying to respond to all of these needs. And if you are, a secondary teacher and you have 30 kids and you see 4 different groups of 30 kids at a time, that's a lot of needs to account for and plan for day in and day out. Academically speaking, we also have some clarity, especially for history and social studies classes, where those needs really sit and where some of the biggest pain points are. So again, not going to be shocking, I think, to a lot of folks in this room, but literacy is a huge challenge. Social studies and history and civics are high literacy demand subjects. And yet a lot of the time, particularly at the secondary level, the educators who are teaching those classes, they don't necessarily have a background in the fundamentals of reading. And so it's really hard to get students to engage with a primary document, get students to read an academic article in 9th grade or in AP US history if they're reading at a 4th grade level. That's a really big challenge. And so finding resources and adapting resources that are viable in a classroom where you might have a student reading at a 4th grade level and a student reading at a 12th grade level or beyond is a major challenge for teachers. And the other piece that goes hand in hand with literacy is background knowledge, right? Background knowledge is the sort of foundation of a lot of literacy, and because especially in K-5, we've marginalized social studies and history instruction. Students then arrive in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade and just have a real patchwork of background knowledge that teachers are trying to figure out how to work with. And so if you're teaching C today, you don't know if your students have A and B. And some students might have A, some students might have B, and some students might have neither or both. And so before you can even begin the lesson, you're sort of starting in a hole, in a deficit. The other thing is K-5, right? I just mentioned it, the lack of a disciplined approach and strategy around K-5 in most locations is a big challenge. But on a more bright note, and then I'll pass it off to Larry. On a more bright note, I think that one thing we also have learned is a real shift in the attitudes towards, but also critically the infrastructure around technology. And so, one of the potentially silver linings of an event like COVID is that it really accelerated the trend towards technology, the comfort with technology, but also the expectations around technology and those experiences. And so we are seeing teachers hungry to use technology in a strategic and thoughtful way, and really comfortable with the idea of doing that, and also having the just logistical infrastructure in place that enables them to do so.
So if you like roller coasters, we're going to go down just for a quick moment. Because so much of what you shared, Posey, is data that we also experience as well. So each year we'll do a survey of students and teachers from around the country. Last year we did a survey that included over 30,000 students, high school juniors and seniors mostly, and about 650 teachers who identified secondary. And it's the same story that we hear year after year. The reason I'm bringing you down for a moment is the professional development needs of teachers. So many teachers see themselves as lifelong learners. That's why we got into this profession, because we just love learning ourselves and we love imparting that gift to our students, but we lack those opportunities. And time and again, we are told by our school districts, sorry, we can't fund you to go to conferences. Sorry, we can't support you in your study tours. Even when things are free, getting sign-offs are hard. And I'll just give you a quick case study. I supervise a department of about 30 teachers. We had teachers who taught IB courses, International Baccalaureate, advanced placement courses, the Regents exams in New York. So you come in and you think, this is great. I have 30 wonderful teachers. We're just going to launch an initiative together and do it. And I'm going to send them to conferences. And then you realize quickly, well, this teacher just teaches 2 sections of that IB course. And this one only does that AP. And this one has a performance plan. We don't know if he's coming back next year. So all of a sudden you realize that you have 30 unique needs. And so you're fighting and advocating for those needs. And it's hard to do that. So my appeal to each of you is to think about the role that professional learning plays for teachers. Virtually every single teacher wants it. They struggle to get it, and that has a ripple effect. Posey mentioned the elementary level. We've seen it marginalized and outright eradicated in many places over the past 2 decades. As you pointed out, that has a crippling effect. It has a crippling effect, those of you like me who come home to elementary school kids every day who have questions about the world around them, but the fire drill happened on the one time in the past 2 weeks we were going to do a social studies lesson, so fire drill, and that's really crippling. The other issue that's hard for us is teachers want to collaborate. They want those collaborative spaces. They want free resources. They trust places like Colonial Williamsburg. They will trust your sites as well for those resources, but they often just don't know about them. They don't know how to get them. So bright spot, though, roller coaster, really fast with bright spot. Good news is kids love history. I know sometimes we have the stereotype that they don't, that it's all dates and facts and Dalton. Oh, no, our students love social studies. In fact, recent release on Education Week, 5 of the top 10 most requested advanced placement courses, exams, are in social studies classes. It's history. It's U.S. history. It's world history. It's political science, government. Kids actually want to take this. So if half of our AP exams in the country are all about social studies, that's an opportunity for each of us in this room. We're hopeful by that data, because what that tells us is our kids want this and our teachers are ready to provide it. We just need to have the advocates to fight for it with us.
Awesome. Data's amazing, isn't it? I do too. So I wanted to do another participatory activity. So this is what happens when you walk into a teacher's session. You have to participate. So while there may be many commonalities that we share in this room, I am comfortable making the assumption that we all have one thing in common. We have participated in education in some form or fashion, right? So what I'd like you to do is close your eyes. And I want you to take 30 seconds to think about that moment or those moments that history came alive for you. Think about what you were doing, what it meant, and how it changed you. So from up here, you should see the smiles on your faces. You guys are all smiling. You're having that memory. So in the interest of time, rather than all of us sharing, does one of you think you have like just a great memory of that moment that history came to you that you want to share?
For me, it's the American Girls collection, which some people may know about. But obviously the dolls were really cool. Like, I get it, the toys. But it was honestly just reading all the stories with my mom, because I was starting to get into them when I was like 6 or 7 years old. So I was starting to learn how to read, and read chapter books in particular. So it was really cool to be able to read like a chapter a night with her. And I was like, wow, like this all happened in the United States. Like, this is all so interesting. And of course I read about like Addie Walker, who was enslaved and she ran away. And then I also read about Felicity. And then we came to Colonial Williamsburg when I was 7 on a family reunion trip. And I was like, oh, like they're dressed like the people in my book. So yeah, I think that's what really like awakened my love for history.
So with a show of hands, how many of your moments involved a teacher? Okay, about a fourth of you. How many involved a museum? More. How about your family? Okay, anybody have multiple of those? Family, museum. Exactly. Okay, perfect. So you can see the power of museums to engage youth and by extension, as they grow older, adults. And so staying with the theme of student engagement, studies have shown that the importance of meeting students where they are and really ensuring that they see themselves in stories of the past. So Leah, you mentioned earlier that you work with the Tang Academy for American Democracy. So how are you in the Tang Academy making democracy more relevant for our students?
Thank you. So I will say one of the things that we really tried to think about when we were creating the Tang Academy, and then when I took over in January of 2020, LOL, because of course 2020 fell apart. But it was one of the things that I think that we really tried to think about was how to make this thing fun, how to make it interesting, because the New York Historical Society is the oldest museum in New York City. It was created in 1804. So with that, like, we have a lot of really cool stuff, but it's also can be a little bit dry, right? And so a lot of what we're trying to think of in education is how do we make this engaging? How do we make this accessible, not just to students, but also the teachers? So I'll run through like a couple of things that we did with this program, especially working with the New York City Department of Education, which is a behemoth. It is so big. There's so many kids, teachers, all sorts of things. So one of the main things that we did, we really tried to eliminate a lot of the barriers. So one of the things is that we have made the program free. And then we've also, the program can happen in 3 different forms. So it can either be virtual, it can be an outreach where we go to your school, or you can come to the museum. Initially, it was conceived as just coming to the museum, but once COVID happened, we sort of opened up these other iterations. And so essentially what this program is that students come to the museum for 4 days, and they are basically immersed in history and in civics. We make connections between ancient Athenian democracy and democracy here in the United States in the 1790s, and then how it's changed over time. So we're thinking about what does direct democracy look like? What does representative democracy look like? And then how has democracy in the United States changed? It's changed significantly since 1790, right? So that's a lot of what we're doing. But again, like I said, we really try to make it fun. So we're dressing kids up in togas. Like, they are doing speeches in our galleries, right, with like visitors and staff all around. Like, they're seeing children walking through the hallways with togas on, or with like ribbons because they're representatives. We actually have a replica Oval Office in our museum, so we have them choose their representatives in the Oval Office, and then they get to vote on an issue that matters in their school. Like, should we have chicken nuggets in the cafeteria, or should we have mozzarella sticks? I don't know, whatever, right? So they have a chance to really think about things that matter to them in their schools. close, and there's a lot of play, there's a lot of fun things that get to happen. But then the other thing is that they're also in a museum, like they're in a museum for 4 days. This museum is their school for 4 days. And so we let them free explore the galleries. When we talk about activism, we have a chance to look at our artwork, look at our objects. We do a lot of inquiry-based instruction so that the students feel like they have a voice, because they do, right? They have a voice in our democracy, even if they're only 12, right? We target particularly 6th graders because in New York City, 6th graders are learning about the ancient world, which for them is so long. I mean, it's long ago for us too, but it's like really, really long ago for a 12-year-old. And so a lot of what we're trying to do is help them make those connections between different historical time periods, while also helping them think, well, why did people think about having participatory governments? Why do people think about democracy in ancient Athens? Why do they care about it in the United States today? What are the drawbacks to these types of government systems, right? And so, we have them think about, we'll have them read a short excerpt from Frederick Douglass's "What to the Slave is the 4th of July." So we'll have them read these different pieces, and we make them short. And again, we try to do a lot of acting and playing with them as well. But that's one way that we really try to engage our students. And then the other thing that I'll say too is that we really try to get the teachers to have buy-in, right? So this program is half students, but the other half is we create a few professional learning cohorts over the course of the school year, and we have the teachers come in and they get to learn what the kids are learning, but obviously at a teacher level. So we invite scholars, in particular from Columbia University, to talk about what was it like in ancient Athens, and what was it like in the U.S. in the 1790s, or in 1865, whatever, right? So we'll have them come in and basically give some lectures, but then we also do the play acting with the teachers as well, right? Because we don't want the teachers to just say, okay, now I have to find a way to turnkey this really hard information for my 12-year-olds, right? We want them to think about, okay, you've got all this big, lofty information. Now, how do we use this information to get our kids engaged? So maybe it's, maybe they have student government in their school, and maybe it's like, okay, how do you get your kids engaged in that? And so we'll talk about different best practices in civics education with them. With things like that. And then we also have them think about what are the issues in your community? Maybe there are problems like the playground is unsafe. Maybe we want to get better equipment in our playground or in our gym, or maybe we want to have drama classes, whatever, right? So we really try to help the teachers also think about how they can engage their students with our content, so with the things that we create at the Historical Society, but then also really giving them hands-on activities so that they can really turnkey that in their classrooms and make it fun and exciting, because I think history is fun and exciting and not boring. So, yeah.
Seems to be a theme among those of us who work in history. We love it. Imagine that. So thinking about what you talked about and really making history fun and engaging and hands-on, but also providing teachers the tools. When Colonial Williamsburg started thinking about the 250th, we took the research that was created by Wondrous, and we're working on the process of creating a tool called history.org, which is a comprehensive U.S. history and civics site for teachers. We're building a beta version this fall, and we're partnering with other museums to ensure that we highlight the best and most relevant resources from our collective collections. So thinking about the possibilities for the 250th, and particularly addressing the group in the room, what role do you think state commissions, civic organizations, and museums and cultural heritage sites play in engaging teachers and students in this work? And how can we ensure the work we do is both welcoming and relevant to the teaching and student audiences without losing the complexities of our collective story? What's the secret sauce? How do we do that? Nope, no pressure, $1 million question. Who wants to start?
All right, we'll pass it around this way. So you play such a critical role right now. As I mentioned earlier, our teachers need resources. They want resources. Another key factor about our kids is they want to come to you. They want cultural institutions in their classrooms. When we do our survey of students, a healthy number of them say to us, please, let's go out to the site, and if we can't come to the site, please bring it in. I think we're long past the how do we have a virtual presence to engage students who might be far away. Where we are now, though, is there are access issues in schools. That's real. We'll work with the schools on that. But we really need you to know that you are valued and needed very much in our K-12 schools. Our teachers want to work with you. It's great if you have programs where you can bring them in and let them get to know your work and then have them be, ambassadors to your work. I was on a study tour years ago with a group where part of the requirement of the free study tour was you have to create lesson plans and go to professional conferences and actually present what you created. So thinking of those things where you're asking the teachers in your network to invest in you by maybe creating lesson materials or that kind of thing. But again, kids want to engage with you, teachers want to. We are looking for a lot of free, so I think part of our responsibility as organizations is helping to find those funders that might support and underwrite. A lot of times districts won't, but what will happen is if teachers and students are engaging with your work and it's really positive, suddenly the district then sees a desire to invest further and they will send more teachers your way. So please do consider the vital role you do play in this, because in this work and in curriculum development in general and teacher experience in general, every one of your museums and sites has something that we need. And we often, at the end of the day, even though we're very digital, we're much more technologically adept in classes than we used to be, we still default to the things that we've always used, or if the technology is not working right, we bring out the worksheets, we bring out the textbooks even now. And I would say most of our educators don't want to do that. They want to be much more digital and nimble and connecting with sources, especially that are very local.
This is a great question. Let's see. I think I agree with everything Larry said. I think, though, I would add to that to really think about feasibility and think about some of the data we shared, but even better, go talk to some teachers in your states and communities to understand not just what they want, but what some of their challenges and barriers are, so that, number one, you can, whatever programming or resources or opportunities you create, can work to reduce those barriers or work around them. There's so many, there's a lot of well-intentioned stuff out there, and honestly, some not so well-intentioned stuff, but there's a lot of, teachers have a lot to sift through. And a lot of it isn't really feasible when the rubber meets the road in their classroom. And so talking to the teachers in your communities and your constituents to understand what they need, what are their realities, I think that's where I would start. And then I would also just really lean into and think about your unique stories and sort of what's special about where you are. Your state or your historic site, and really lean into that as an entry point for your audience of more local teachers. I think, to be frank, someone in this room is not going to like me. One of you is not going to like me for saying this, but I don't think the world needs another lesson plan on the Bill of Rights or the Constitution. But I think what the world and what teachers need and want are this really interesting, maybe it's a 2-minute video or a 5-minute activity on a person in your community or in your state who was a change maker, who did something. Maybe somebody, even better if it's somebody who is a young person who might look or sound like the young people in our classrooms. When we were talking about those moments, right, that you connected with history, I was also thinking of a book called Sarah Morton's Day. And it was this book when I was a kid that I loved, and it was pictures of a historical reenactor in what was then Plymouth Plantation, now Plymouth and Patuxent Museums. And it was just showing her day. She was a kid. And I connected with that book so much as a young girl, because I was like, this girl, like, she was my age and she was like baking bread and on a fire. That's so cool. And, but we all know that it was very easy for me as a white girl from Connecticut to find and connect with a resource like that. But it's it's harder for the kids in many of our communities to find resources like that. So I would say look for those stories, try to find ways to amplify them, and talk to teachers about what's going to actually be feasible. And don't be surprised or disappointed. It is not an insult for them to tell you, yeah, this is great. I've got about 10 minutes every other week. And so like work within that. Like, that's not an insult to you. That's a reality. And unfortunately, if you devote time and resources to a 2-week-long unit plan on a very obscure event that happened down the road, I just don't see that as being all that feasible in the majority of classrooms.
Yeah, that's a really good point about them having only 10 minutes. Very true. So one of the things I wanted to say to your question was about like not shying away from the complexities. And I think in my time working with students and teachers, like they want all of the complexities all the time. And I think it's definitely worth thinking about how you can complicate stories that maybe they've heard before, or maybe they've never heard before. And I think especially with K-12 students, especially with K through 5, like they're so justice oriented because they're little kids. Like that's just how they are developmentally. And so I think when you can tell these stories, I think you can trust them with this history. And I think they will rise to the occasion. I've seen it happen many times with 6th graders. I've seen it happen with 1st graders or 12th graders, whatever. But I've seen it happen with almost every group of students that I've engaged with, that, you know, if you don't shy away from those hard histories, they will really meet you where you're at. And I think the other thing too is that sometimes with cultural institutions, we're sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? Like hemmed in by maybe what your collection might be, or hemmed in by maybe you don't work in the curatorial department and they put on a show and you're like, okay, how do I work with this show? Whatever, right? So I think I will say, as much as you can find the story that you think your audiences will latch onto, like definitely try to do that. I'll say in our as an example at the Historical Society, so we a few years ago launched a website called WAMS, but it's Women in the American Story, and basically we were telling teachers, hey, you've got to teach the whole survey of American history at some point when you're teaching, and why not talk about a woman in the different units you have to teach. So if you've got to teach about mercantilism, we know you have to do that, but why don't you teach about this lady instead of the normal man that you might teach about, right? And so it's not necessarily changing what people are doing in schools, because you really can't do that necessarily, but it's thinking about how can we look at this from a slightly different angle, and how can we then use either things from our collection, and in that case, we have used things from lots of collections to sort of put this story together.
You guys are saying so many things that I'm like, if we only had an hour and a half, I'd have so many more questions. I'm not going to do that to you, though, I promise. So, Larry, you are with the National Council for the Social Studies, and I think one of the things that we know in this work is that partnerships are really important. So how do you think groups that are working on the 250th might partner with organizations such as NCSS to more effectively reach teachers and students?
So as a membership association, I like to think that we are an organization of people. That's all we are. And our biggest asset are the educators that come together. So we are also conveners. That's what we do best. We bring people together. But to bring people together, we do need good content to bring them together with. We need good presenters and thought leaders to bring them together with. And beyond just traditional conferences and seminars and webinars, we are always looking for cultural partners like you to come with us, to come join us, to bring your work, your ideas to us, your interpretation of your state's or local learning standards, for example, or the curricula that you develop. I love the idea of, again, not to be disrespectful either about the Bill of Rights lesson, but there are so many stories out there. There's so many ways that even the common stories or themes, like working with our Constitution, can be interpreted. And I know that you all have that storytelling capacity in wherever you are. So we need that. We need your voice in order for the teacher voice that comes together through us to shine. So it's an open invitation to all of you. We, in addition to having annual conferences, and our sister associations all do the same, we are always looking for that summit, that institute, that way to bring teachers together. We can't always fund it, and I know you're always in that position as well. Not always, but you may be in that position as well. But together, thinking about, is there a donor or a funder out there that we could work with together to say, if we could just bring your vision and dreams and materials together with our members and attendees, we can create a really strong set of instructional resources and ideas to not just for the 250th, but where we take the 250th going forward. So again, open invitation, but you play such a vital role in us coming together. We love to have educators. We love to have colleagues that work in your agencies and your institutions who are thinking and planning and curating to come and share. Some of the strongest sessions I've seen at our conference are program directors at a museum testing materials out with teachers and finding and doing that. They walked away with a list of 100 teachers that are on their speed dial list of go-to people. So it is an exchange. Just know that you're always welcome and we're always happy to talk to you. And shameless plug, socialstudies.org is always the easiest way to reach us and learn more about groups like us.
So we're going to try and leave a little bit of time for questions. So as Cliff reminded us yesterday, anniversaries are a time when we consider legacies, both what came before and what we will leave behind when we're gone. And so Colonial Williamsburg was founded during America's 150th, and we have quite a few legacy projects here underway for 250th. So when you think about the next 250, what do you hope that the 250th leaves for current and future teachers and students?
All right, I'll start first, and then I'll pass it down to you. Okay, just so used to it. It's like muscle memory. So our students, even from the youngest ages, young kids, young learners, they love traditions. And then as they start to get older, they want to learn, like, why do we celebrate this? Why do we do this? What else aren't we doing? The notion of commemoration is really important to understand tradition and why that happens, but why we commemorate things, why we have a 250th. What does that even mean? This is an opportunity, I think, for our young learners to engage in that notion of why commemoration is important. But this has always been about how we understand the importance of this moment and carry it forward into our future. And what lessons do we learn over 250 years? What would the world look like 250 years from now? That's where our students ask a lot of those questions. So I hope the legacy is that through history.org, through your work, your partnership, maybe the convenings we can do together, the data that we continue to collect on teachers and kids and how they best learn and engage with the past. I hope the legacy is we came together during this time. We created resources that reminded us all the importance of story, the importance of commemoration, the importance of reflection and past, all as a way to get us engaged with where we go in the future. And I think if we can do that, and I believe we're in that direction now, that's really powerful. The barriers are, of course, time, money, resources, things like that. But I think if we're aware together these are barriers and we just say, let's find a way through them, and we stay focused on this is a national learning moment, and it's a sustained learning moment. And one last thought to this is, if the celebration is only beginning in 2026, then we've really done our job. It's not about 2026, really. It's about coming together to seize this opportunity to move the needle forward on teaching and learning.
So I'm thinking about this question as a former teacher, but also as a parent of young kids, and what I hope for them and for their friends and our the classrooms they're in. And I think at Wondrous we talk a lot about the concept of windows and mirrors, and the idea that in a learning experience, it's really important that learning experience offer you a window into a different world or a different culture, a person who is different than you, but also at the same time that there's opportunities for mirrors, for you to see yourself reflected in history and in that learning experience, for you to find a connection. I mentioned for me, it was this book of this pilgrim girl with these pictures, and I could see how similar she was to me. And so I think my hope for my kids and for our students and young people is just that every kid will have that opportunity to, I think we've been pretty good-ish about some of the windows, but I really want every kid to have a mirror. And I think that the 250th is an opportunity to really dig deep and make sure that there are ways for kids to connect and see themselves in our past as well as in our future.
So I'm thinking with the 250th that I'm really hoping that it just brings history, obviously, to the fore, and the role that we all play, right? Not everybody lives in a participatory democracy, right, where we can engage with our government and engage with each other and think about the past, what it was like, things that were good, things that were not so good. But I think it's really important for our students and teachers and all of us to know, like, we can change things that we don't like about this government, but it really requires people to do something and people to stay at it. And so I'm really hoping that the celebration of the 250th anniversary will help people think, oh, okay, I think I've got to do something. I got to roll up my sleeves and do a thing, because so much of our lives are the way that they are because somebody did that a long time ago, right? And I think that's super important for our students and our teachers to remember, and for us to remember and to understand the role that we play in this story, right, of the United States.
Well, thank you all so much for joining us today and for giving us your perspectives. We probably have time for one very quick question, just given that we started late. However, if you guys are all okay to stick around, we'll stick around a little bit longer if anybody has a burning question. But does somebody have one they want to ask in front of everyone? There is a microphone stand here. Or you can use teacher voices. Let's go teacher voice here in the middle. Standing up. If you can make it to the mic, great. Yes. I'm also fine with teacher voice.
First of all, thank you. Thank you for being part of educating our children so that they will understand how to take their place in society. That's number one. And number two, the history is that those, as it's been said, those who do not know their history are doomed to repeat it. And we cannot keep going back, and fighting the same old battles. Forward is the only way. We've just got to keep going forward. And with this, we'll be able to do that because our children must have hope and a future. Thank you for being in the classroom. Thank you.
I did see one more hand. Do you want to come to the mic or can you teach your voice? Let's do it.
Hi, thank you for being here. I'm thrilled to be here in Northern New Jersey. I work for Bergen County Division of Cultural and Historic Affairs. And why I came to this session is just curious as to what you are doing. Give me maybe one example of what you have planned for the 250th that you are going to be involving teachers and students in. Is there one specific program or one idea that you have going around in your mind? Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll take this in a slightly different answer. So as a professional association of teachers, we actually have a series of honor societies. We have what's called Rho Kappa. It's a National Social Studies Honor Society. We're proud to have over 800 chapters. Many of your states, your high schools have them. We also have a junior version for students at the middle level. And one idea we're noodling around with, so it's not, official or final yet, but, our chapters, to be in part of them, it's a good GPA, it's a certain amount of coursework in social studies, and then there's a project that's a local project. And so again, invitation to each of you, and please connect with me through socialstudies.org. If you have a high school with a chapter, is that an opportunity for you to connect with students directly in your high school? The civic engagement projects kids have to do are locally determined. We don't mandate anything specifically, but some of the projects they do are really compelling. They will do civic engagement activities. Some examples of chapters, they'll bring in local officials or leaders. They'll ask a mayor to come in and talk about a day in your life. They may engage with Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, things like that. So please think about Rho Kappa as a possibility. We'd like to engage with our student groups to encourage them to be, kind of directly contributing in that way. And then one other last thing is for teachers, we provide a lot of professional support through our own publications. We'd like to work on creating something that's, I don't want to say commemorative so much as helps educators to position this, much as we've talked about today, both understanding our past and moving into our future. And much to what Leah and Posey have said today, we believe wholeheartedly that kids need to be prepared for civic engagement. We were very fortunate last week to be part of a civic learning program with Justice Sonia Sotomayor and Justice Amy Coney Barrett. And one of the things that they talked about was too often civics can be perceived as preparing to vote, preparing for elections. Not that those are bad things. We want everyone to vote, but it's the little c. It's how a child wakes up every morning, how we as adults wake up every morning, and just see the world around us as a place to engage, a place to take care of, a place to be worried about, and how we do that. So that's my long-winded answer to say, Student Honor Society, please check out chapters locally and work with us. And also know that we are trying to provide teacher support as well through our content and call for content. We welcome you as cultural institutions, as school districts, as thought leaders in education. If you'd like to publish with us or create with us how you're interpreting the 250th for students and teachers, please let us know.
Yeah, so for the 250th, I mean, one of the main things is this program, the Tang Academy for American Democracy. And actually, we are building a new wing to our museum, which is cool. But we're going to have, more classrooms and more spaces to be able to bring more students into the museum, but also to have more professional learning communities in the museum. And then the other thing that I know that one of our curators is doing, our head curator, is putting together an exhibition with artwork from the community all throughout New York City with their artwork, but also with their commentary about what the 250th means to them in as far as like the label text go. And then I know another PD that we're doing, we do one sort of based off the Educating for American Democracy roadmap on reflective patriotism. So we've been doing that PD quite a bit, and we are going to be doing that even more as the 250th approaches.
Again, we will be up here if you have more questions or if you want more details on the answers. But thank you all so much for joining us today. It was lovely spending this time with you, and we'll see you in future sessions.